We are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and here we are for the second time this week. We're now in our second fight week as we look to break down the midweek UFC Fight Island event from Abu Dhabi. This event will be next Wednesday, and it's headlined by two surging featherweights with Calvin Kattar meeting Dan Ige in the octagon. Just before we get into the fights though, remember at MMAPlay365 we will have our UFC Fight Island offers running all the way up to the final Fight Island event on July 25th. You can get the handicapper monthly subscription and all the betting advice you'll ever need for just $10 for your first month. You can also get our daily fantasy sports monthly subscription and all the strategies and information you'll need for both DraftKings and FanDuel for just $10 for your first month too. At $10 you are paying just $2.50 per event. After your first month the price will be $29.99 per month, but there are no cancellation fees with MMAPlay365, so you can cancel at any time for free if you wish to do so. Go and visit www.MMAplay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And without further ado, let's break down some fights. And in the main event, we've got Calvin Kattar versus Dan Ige. I absolutely love this fight. We've currently got Calvin Kattar, the minus 280 favourite, with the comeback on Dan Ige as a plus 240 underdog. I actually think that this line is pretty wide. I get that Kattar's favoured completely, but for where the value lies, I think the value is with the underdog in Dan Ige at plus 240. And listen, the thing is with Dan Ige, he's constantly producing win after win as a betting underdog. The dude just performs so well in these kind of spots. I'd actually line this fight much closer, much shorter. And as for the line movement itself, I do think that we see that closer to fight night on Wednesday. I do think that we'll see money coming on Dan Ige. I don't think it'll be a tremendous amount of money, but I do think the line will close a little bit shorter than where we're at right now. And as for how this fight plays out, it's really interesting. Both fighters are producing relatively quick turnarounds. Calvin Kattar coming off that TKO win against Jeremy Stephens. Dan Ige coming off the decision win against Edson Barboza. Both great wins in my opinion. Both were tough fights again in my opinion. So we've got Kattar that's predominantly the striker. Got really crisp hands. He has that boxing background and you can really see that he's got an educated jab, an educated 1-2. That straight 2 down the middle is absolutely money for Kattar. You'll see him throw elbows like he did against Jeremy Stephens inside the pocket as well. He won't discriminate and he'll go to the body and to the head. The body of work that Calvin Kattar puts in with his hands is just absolutely beautiful. But he'll also mix in kicks as well. He's got a nice low kick. Again, just an educated striker. He'll kick when he needs to, but he really does like picking his opponent apart with his hands. And he'll find those openings with his hands as well. If his opponents make one mistake, he'll make you pay for it and he'll put you down. Then on the flip side, you've got Dan Ige, who is a ridiculously well-rounded fighter, a fighter that is improving fight to fight, developing fight to fight, prefers to be on the ground to work his jiu-jitsu. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, but his wrestling's good as well, so he has that style of, yes, he's good on the ground, but he can get you there as well. And he's striking, again, improving fight after fight. You know, sort of 3-4 fights ago, Dan Ige's striking was okay, he could hang, but now he's becoming a much better striker. Edson Barboza, who is a killer striker, yes, Barboza had his moments against Ige, of course he did, but Ige had his moments against Barboza on the feet as well. So to me, that fight shows how far Dan Ige's come with that striking. He's an absolute dog inside the cage. It doesn't matter where the fight goes, he'll be comfortable, and that's what's so interesting in this fight, because he has a choice. He can either stand with Kattar and test the waters with his striking, or he can try and take Kattar down. Now, the problem that I see with Dan Ige in this fight is I just think Kattar is too good in his defense, and then his offense in striking I think is going to be a key factor as well. So I do think that Ige might be able to take Kattar down at some point in this fight. Remember, it's 5 rounds, so the longer this fight goes on, the more opportunities Ige is going to have to take him down. But I don't think Ige is going to be too successful keeping Kattar down and grappling on top of him. I really don't. It wouldn't surprise me if Ige had a moment in a round or two where he did keep Kattar down for 30 seconds, 60 seconds and do some work, but I don't see Ige getting Kattar out of there with a submission or ground and pound. And I do think that Kattar's defensive wrestling is good enough to stuff takedowns, or if he does get put on his back, he's good enough to scramble and work his way back up to his feet. So I don't think the fight is going to be won and lost on the mat, which sort of takes away Ige's biggest strength, in my opinion. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. And again, I think Ige's definitely going to have his moments against Calvin Kattar, but Kattar's technical striking is just too good, and Kattar's cardio is very good as well. And it's a weird one with Ige because he has been known to sort of take rounds off, at least that's what it looks like from the outside looking in, but then he has cardio again the following round and pushes himself that next round. So I don't think it's a case of he gasses. I think he might just be taking a little time off in particular rounds to make sure that he doesn't, blow too much of that gas tank and he's still got something left for later on in the fight. But Kattar keeps a nice, calm, steady pace. It allows him to not tire. It allows him to go deep into rounds without looking tired. And I think the 5 rounds, if it hits the 4th and 5th round, I do think Kattar will be the fresher fighter. But you can't take time off against Kattar because his hands are just too good. His volume's too good. His activity is very high as well. And I think that if Ige does have a round or two where he does slow down a little bit, I think Kattar's going to make him pay. So I think from a stylistic perspective, Calvin Kattar holds a lot of advantages in this fight. It is going to be a dogfight from Ige's perspective. He's not going to get walked all over. It's not going to be a whitewash, but I do think Calvin Kattar's going to win the fight, so I'm picking Calvin Kattar to win. And in the next fight, we've got Tim Elliott making a quick turnaround as well. He fights Ryan Benoit. Tim Elliott, currently the -120 favourite. The comeback on Benoit at +100. Now, in regards to where the value is in this fight, I do think the value lies with Tim Elliott, but it is marginal value. At first, I thought the line was way too short, but actually when you run the tape on both of these guys, you can see why the line is much closer than what I thought it would be initially. But in regards to where the line goes, where it moves closer to fight night, I do think more money is going to come in on Tim Elliott just because he's got that name value. He's been in there with some of the best fighters in the division, and I just think that people might feel more safe with their money on Tim Elliott opposed to Ryan Benoit, who I don't believe has fought the level of competition that Tim Elliott has. But before we get into the style versus style in this fight, it's worth mentioning the form and the record of both fighters, because you look at Ryan Benoit, his last win was back in 2017 against Ashkan Mokhtarian. I think we all expected Benoit to really run through Mokhtarian, but he didn't. It was a bit of a lackluster performance. Then he doesn't fight again for 2 years, and then he goes against Alateng Hailey. He loses a split decision to Hailey, a fight where he probably took that first round and then just let the fight slip away from him. There may have been a little bit of ring rust there, but I don't totally buy that. Then you look at Tim Elliott. As good and as fun as Tim Elliott is, he's actually on a 3-fight losing streak, losing to Davison Figueiredo, which I personally don't put too much stock into because Figueiredo beats most fighters in that division. Then he goes out there and loses to Askar Askarov, where he looked absolutely horrific. He didn't look his usual self, wasn't shooting for many takedowns, looked like he had a real off night that night. Then in his last fight, he goes in against Brandon Royval. I actually cashed Brandon Royval as an underdog in that fight, but he looked more like himself. He went in there, he shot a takedown straight away. He was ragdolling Brandon Royval in that first round, just looking like the Tim Elliott of old. But what surprised me more than anything in that fight is that Tim Elliott gassed hard after that first round. Albeit Brandon Royval was a solid grappler himself, he didn't give anything away to Tim Elliott, made Elliott work for everything that Elliott was doing. Like I say, ultimately he gassed out really badly and then Royval finished him in the second round. I actually didn't expect that from Tim Elliott, so that's put a real question mark on this fight. Did Elliott just have a bad wake up? Was he suffering from something inside the cage? Was he ill prior to the fight? We don't know, but it just didn't look like Tim Elliott in there. I've never seen him gas that hard so quickly. But from the stylistic perspective, Brandon Royval is the type of fighter that beats somebody like Tim Elliott. And I said that with my breakdown as well. For somebody to beat Tim Elliott, you have to be able to be comfortable on your back. You have to have the jiu-jitsu skills to sweep, reverse, to really make Elliott work. Otherwise, Elliott will just run all over you on the mat. And that's where I don't think Benoit is that type of fighter. Benoit's got a good get-up game and that's fine, but he doesn't have that jiu-jitsu, or at least not that I've seen, to be able to truly compete with Tim Elliott on the mat and make Tim Elliott pay for any mistakes that he makes, because Elliott does make mistakes on the mat. He does leave holes to be swept, reversed or submitted. I just don't think Benoit's that type of fighter. Like I say, he can get back up to his feet, but then will that turn into a fight where Tim Elliott is just takedown after takedown after takedown and racking up sort of 6, 7, 8, 9 takedowns in the fight and winning purely just off completed takedowns? So it could get real sketchy for Benoit if he can't defend those takedowns. And this is another thing. With Ryan Benoit, he has this wrestling background, but I just don't know whether he's struggled to bridge that wrestling into MMA. And the reason I say that is you look at the fighters that have been able to take Benoit down and in the volume of takedowns as well. Alhassan Haley took him down 4 times. Brandon Moreno took him down 5 times. Freddie Serrano took him down 5 times. Pettis got him down. Josh Sampo got him down twice. So the dude gets taken down in most of his fights, and that's the biggest concern. However, Benoit also has a solid path to victory in this fight because he's got legitimate power in his hands. Elliott gets hurt in a lot of his fights. Benoit's hands are fast as well. He also has got a sneaky high kick. So Benoit on the feet could be a real problem for Elliott. And if he catches Elliott, I think he will put him out. So when I'm making this pick, I've got to look at both styles, both path to victories. And I just think that Tim Elliott's experience, I think that Tim Elliott will know that Benoit's got power in his hands, and if he doesn't know, he'll know within probably the first 30 to 60 seconds. So I think that'll make Elliott look for takedowns more than usual, and that's his style anyway. I think he will get Benoit down if he wants him down. I think Benoit can get back up to his feet, but I think Elliott will just rinse and repeat. If Elliott doesn't gas in this fight, and this is the big question mark, if Elliott doesn't gas, then he wins this fight. So I am going to give Elliott the benefit of the doubt with that cardio, because that was the first time I'd really saw him gas that hard so quickly against Royval. I will give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to be picking Tim Elliott to win the fight. And in the next fight, it only got added a couple of days ago. We've got Jimmie Rivera versus Cody Stamann. I think this is amazing matchmaking. It's a really, really good fight. So props to Sean Shelby for this. Jimmie Rivera currently sitting as the -145 favourite with the comeback on Cody Stamann at +115. I was really unsure of where they were going to line this fight because obviously Rivera, with those 2 back-to-back losses against Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling, no shame in those losses by the way, but it's the fact that he was potentially a couple of fights away from a title fight. Now he probably might not get that title fight now in his UFC career purely because of how stacked the bantamweight division is. And then on the flip side, Cody Stamann is the in-form fighter, no slouch, good record, looked great last time out against Kelleher. So I was really intrigued of where this fight was lined, but now I've seen the betting lines. I do think that the value is with Jimmie Rivera. I did expect him to be a little higher, maybe -170, -175. I totally get the love on Stamann, but I think Rivera's just been in there with the better guys, and I think he's still a solid fighter, and I think he should be higher up the rankings as well. With that said though, Cody Stamann could be good for his plus money, so like I say, it's a really good fight. As for where the line moves, I think it's going to fluctuate in fight week up until the fight night on Wednesday. I think we'll see some money coming on Rivera, maybe push him to -150, -160, and at that point I think you'll see money coming back in on Cody Stamann. So for where the line closes, I don't think it's going to be too far from where we're at right now. But as for how this fight plays out, I actually think that Rivera's got a lot of stylistic advantages in this fight. First one, physically. Just to note, this fight is at 145 pounds, not at 135 pounds. Obviously, Stamann fought Kelleher at 145 pounds. These guys clearly don't want to cut too much weight during the times that we're in, which is completely understandable. But Jimmie Rivera is a big built bantamweight anyway, so with that extra 10 pounds, I think he'll be much bigger than Stamann. I think he'll be more physical than Stamann. But from a stylistic perspective, both fighters like to strike. Cody Stamann's got a boxing background. You can see that technique in his striking. But Jimmie Rivera, he's a striker as well. Got the wrestling in the back pocket if he needs it. The thing is with Stamann, he'll mix between the striking and the wrestling. If the striking isn't working out, he's got that wrestling as plan B. The problem that I've got for Stamann in this fight though, the striking's relatively close. And I actually think Stamann's technique might be better than Jimmie Rivera's. But I think Rivera's the faster fighter. Rivera will pump out more volume. And I think his weapons in the striking department are just a little bit more dangerous than what Stamann's are. So Stamann will mix in kicks as well, but the more sort of distance gauging kicks, more of a frustration. But Jimmie Rivera, when he comes forward, he slams hard low kicks. He did it against John Dodson, slowed Dodson down, and that made Rivera look like the quicker fighter in here. which speed is something that needs to be mentioned for this fight as well, because I think Rivera is the faster fighter. I think he'll be in and out of the pocket quicker than what Stamann will be. But Rivera's comfortable in that boxing range, in that pocket, landing strikes, keeping his head movement, and then being able to back out as well. So although Stamann is definitely going to have his moments in this fight, I just think Jimmie Rivera will be leaving these striking exchanges just looking a little bit better in the judges' eyes. And what this is going to do from Stamann's perspective is it's going to make him start shooting takedowns, because I think Stamann will realise that he might be just getting outstruck a little bit. He might be falling down on the scorecards just a little bit, and it's going to make him start shooting takedowns. But this is where I feel there's a key factor in this fight, because Jimmie Rivera's takedown defense, his wrestling defense, is very, very good. He's got a 95% takedown defense. He's only been taken down once. That was by Jan in his last fight, and even that was a momentary takedown. Jan didn't control him on the mat or anything. Rivera's got good scrambles, and he's good getting back up to his feet as well. So I'm not totally convinced that Stamann is going to be able to take Rivera down. Sterling tried taking Rivera down 7 times. It didn't work. Sterling's a legitimate wrestler, MMA wrestler as well. So I think Stamann's just going to have problems in specific areas in this fight, which will likely make Jimmie Rivera start to pull ahead just a little bit. Now, if I'm wrong, and if Stamann can get these takedowns and he can rinse and repeat, like I've just mentioned with Tim Elliott, it is going to get very dicey on those scorecards. And this, for me, is where the line represents the fight, because I don't think Jimmie Rivera is going to totally run through Stamann. I don't think it's going to be easy for Rivera. If Stamann can get his wrestling going in this fight, and if he can start to land some strikes on Rivera, it's going to make a very close decision. And at that point, that's where the line is looking pretty much where it is right now. But with that said, I do see stylistic advantages for Jimmie Rivera. I do think he's been in there with the better competition. I think he's beaten the better opponents. So I am going to pick Jimmie Rivera to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Molly McCann versus Taila Santos. And currently this fight is a straight up pick'em. So I think that there's value either side. And again, it's one of those pick'em fights where if you've got a good read on either side, both sides playable. As for where the line moves, I'm really not too sure with this one, because I can see the angle for both fighters. I think Taila Santos is the better technical fighter, but Molly McCann's got more experience in the UFC. She's looking like she's improved as well over her last few fights. If I was going to hazard a guess, I would guess that more money comes in on Molly McCann. Again, I don't think it's going to be a huge amount of money. I could just maybe see her closing the slight favourite in this fight. And as for these fighters and how the fight plays out, I think Taila Santos was a little underwhelming in her last fight in her UFC debut. She was 15-0 coming into that fight, undefeated. She fought Mara Romero Barella, who since that fight with Santos is now on a 3-fight losing streak, so that doesn't look great from Santos's perspective. You could make the argument, UFC debut, jitters and all that. And then on the flip side, you've got Molly McCann, who's now riding a 3-fight win streak in the UFC after beating Kattar, Ariane Lipski and Diana Belbita. And after that loss on her debut to Gillian Robertson, who just went through her like a knife through butter, I think people were thinking that Molly McCann was very one-dimensional and didn't have a ground game. But she has shown since that she does have a ground game. She's got good wrestling, good takedowns. You know, she took down Diana Belbita. She had her in some very close submission attempts as well. So McCann isn't the one-dimensional fighter that we may have thought that she was after a UFC debut. And that's what's interesting in this fight, because Taila Santos is the better fighter technically on the feet, striking. She's got good Muay Thai, she's crisp, she's got volume, she's got cardio as well. That's something that is a question mark with Molly McCann, because McCann does tire later in fights, especially when she's made to work, and specifically in that Belbita fight. And I think that she might have been tired in that fight because she was wrestling and she was grappling, and that's not the forefront of a style and not the forefront of a game. And it could actually play a factor in this fight, because I do think that she's going to need wrestling and grappling and top control and top time against Taila Santos, because Santos, as I've mentioned, I believe is the better striker. I think that it'll be quite evident inside the cage as well. I think McCann will notice the volume and the accuracy and, like I say, just her overall Muay Thai style of striking. So that's actually where I'm at with this fight. I think if it stays on the feet for 15 minutes, I think Santos will come away with victory. But if McCann starts wrestling, I do think that she can take Taila Santos down. I do think she can get some top time. That might tire Santos out a little bit. It might make Santos very aware of the takedown, and because of that, the volume and the striking might just be reduced a little bit from Santos because she's worrying about potentially getting taken down. That's where Molly McCann could take over the fight. The only question mark on that is the gas tank and the cardio for McCann. It's going to be really hot, I'd imagine, inside that octagon. With it being in Abu Dhabi, I know it's early in the morning for these fighters, but it's still not going to be the weather it is back at home, even if it is early morning Abu Dhabi. So that's the question mark for me with Molly McCann. But if McCann can win those opening 2 rounds without tiring too badly and scoring takedowns, even if she does gas out for that 3rd round, I'm not convinced that Santos will be able to put McCann out in that final 5 minutes. So for that reason, I do think that Molly McCann can take 2 rounds out of the 3, and I'm going to pick Molly McCann to win the fight. And in the next fight, this is going to be an explosive one. We've got the return of Abdul Razak Alhassan versus Mounir Lazzez. Alhassan is currently the -290 favourite, with the comeback on the newcomer Lazzez at +245. In regards to value on the betting line, I still think that there's some value on Alhassan in this fight. The dude is just so hard to back against. You know, he's got that UFC experience, he's well-rounded, good striking, good judo, and the dude hits like an absolute truck. He's the definition of violence inside the cage. I think that he's just going to be simply too much for the newcomer in Lazzez. And as for where the line moves closer to fight night, I do think that we see Alhassan enter that -300 range. How high it gets, I'm not too sure, because let's remember, Alhassan is coming back off a layoff. He hasn't fought since he knocked out Nico Price back in September 2018. And that's actually my only real concern in this fight for Alhassan, just a layoff. Is he going to be rusty? Is he going to need time to settle into the fight? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I do think Alhassan might hit that -300 range, maybe go up to -350. As for the fight itself, like I say, my only concern with Alhassan is that layoff, and as I've already mentioned, is he going to be rusty? If he needs time to settle into this fight, it might end up being very sketchy for him, because Mounir Lazzez is a very aggressive fighter himself. He's long, he likes to come forward, he's got power in his hands also. He likes to be the bully inside the cage, so if Alhassan starts slow, then it could get very dicey for him, because I don't think Lazzez will step off the gas. I think he'll do the opposite. I think he'll put pedal to the metal and come forward hard and try and get Alhassan out of there. But in regards to the style and the aggression of Alhassan, I do feel that if he comes into this fight and he does take a little bit of time and Lazzez does put the pressure on him and start cracking him, I think it's going to wake him up really quickly. And what Alhassan will do is he'll counter that aggression with aggression himself, and that's where it becomes a problem from Lazzez. If Lazzez does force this pace and this pressure, I think he's going to get knocked out. And on the flip side, if Alhassan doesn't need any time to get settled into this fight and comes right out the blocks against Lazzez, I think Lazzez is going to get knocked out. It's just a really tough spot for Lazzez, in my opinion, because I think that unless he takes Alhassan down to remove those knockout opportunities, I think that he's in big trouble, and I'm not convinced he's going to be able to take Alhassan down. Omari Akhmedov got Alhassan down a few times, but he was made to work for those. Alhassan's got good judo, good base, strong hips. I don't think it's going to be easy to take him down, and that's not really Lazzez's style from what I've seen either. So I think that Lazzez is in trouble in this fight. I think it's just unfortunate that he makes his debut against somebody like Alhassan, and unfortunately I don't see Lazzez even making the scorecard. So I'm going to be picking Abdul Razak Alhassan to get a win back on his return. And in the next fight, we've got a short notice fight. It's supposed to have been John Phillips versus Dusko Todorovic. That fight was scheduled a couple of times. Unfortunately, this time Todorovic pulled out, but he's now replaced with Khamzat Chimaev. And the current betting lines, we've got Khamzat Chimaev making his UFC debut as a -240 favourite. The comeback on John Phillips currently +173. I totally get this betting line. Chimaev was somebody that I've heard about now for around a year. When I was in Sweden last year for UFC Stockholm for Alex Rakic's fight, obviously Alexander Gustafsson was on that card. So we got talking to the head coach at the All-Stars gym in Sweden. And with the All-Stars guys sat next to us, there was a fighter named Khamzat Chimaev. And after talking to the head coach at All-Stars, he was saying some really good things about Chimaev. He was saying he was an unbeaten fighter and that he was an absolute beast, fighter we should look out for. There were comparisons to Khabib Nurmagomedov, Khabib version 2.0. And listen, they are big claims in the world of MMA. So instantly I took a mental note of the guy, and I thought, well, if he really is this good, we'll see him in the UFC at some point soon. A year later, welcome Khamzat Chimaev. And after watching tape on Chimaev, I totally get this minus 240 betting line. It's a stylistic nightmare for John Phillips, short notice or not. I think the value is on Chimaev. And as for where the line goes, I think money may come in on Chimaev, but I do think there might be some hesitancy regarding the fact that it is short notice. It is his UFC debut. He is only 6-0. But like I say, if you watch tape on Chimaev, you'll see his style. You'll see that he probably is going to be a nightmare for somebody like John Phillips. So it really wouldn't shock me if the money that came in was for Khamzat Chimaev. As for how this fight plays out though, with all that being said about Chimaev, he does have to be very careful in this fight because he is very aggressive. He does like to come forward. His hands aren't always by his chin. He can get a little bit reckless, especially when he's striking himself, because he also has power in his own hands as well. So if he gets too overconfident in this spot and makes some mistakes and leaves some holes, you can bet your bottom dollar that John Phillips is going to land on him and knock him clean out, because Phillips has that fight-ending knockout power. But if Chimaev is smart in this fight, is a bit defensively aware, especially early on, he can close that distance. He'll be able to get a body lock around Phillips. He'll be able to drag him to the mat, take him down, roll on him. He'll be able to land ground and pound. He'll be able to lock in submission attempts. I honestly think that the first time, or maybe the second time, if Phillips gets back up once, but when Chimaev gets Phillips down and gets him settled on the mat, it'll be over within a few minutes after that, assuming that there is time left to work on the clock in that round. I think that John Phillips is an exciting fighter. We love to see fighters like him fight because he'll wing bombs. He's got huge power, brutal knockout power, but his big weakness in MMA, it's that ground game. It's the grappling. When he gets taken down, he does struggle to get back up to his feet. We have seen it time and time again. And fighters can really go to work while they're on top of him. And Chimaev is just going to be an absolute nightmare on top. Like I say, he's got brutal ground and pound. He's had stoppages via ground and pound on the mat. His last win was a Darce choke that was executed perfectly. I think Chimaev is a legitimate fighter. He's a legitimate prospect. He's got a good fight for him stylistically. I think he goes out there and I think he finishes John Phillips. So I'm picking Khamzat Chimaev to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ricardo Ramos versus Lerone Murphy. Ramos currently the minus 170 favourite. The comeback on Murphy at plus 150. I think at this current betting line, there's value on Ramos. I do think that he should possibly be closer to the minus 200 mark. I don't mean any disrespect to Murphy because Murphy's a fun fighter. I really loved his debut. You know, you can see that the dude has got legitimate skills. It's just I think that Ramos has a very defined path to victory here. As for where the line moves, I actually think that we see some money coming in on Murphy because he did impress in his debut against Zubaira Tukhugov. You know, it was really hot in the arena that night. He went hard for 3 rounds, didn't really tire too badly, so he's got solid cardio. And listen, Tukhugov is not an easy fight for any fighter, never mind your UFC debut when the arena is roaring for your opponent. So credit to Lerone Murphy, and like I say, I wouldn't be surprised if the late money came in on him over Ricardo Ramos. But as for how this fight plays out, like I mentioned, I think Ramos has got a very glaring path to victory, and I think that's on the ground game with the jiu-jitsu. And for me, not only is there huge levels between the ground game of Ramos and the ground game of Murphy, but one thing that I've seen from Lerone Murphy's game, especially in that Tukhugov fight, is a lot of the times, especially in the centre of the cage, Murphy will show his back to try and stand up to his feet. Tukhugov did take his back at one point in that fight, but Ricardo Ramos is an absolute expert in that area. If Murphy shows Ramos his back, Ramos is going to take it instantly. He's going to get a body lock or get his hooks in, and he's going to cause a huge problem for Murphy when he's on his back with that rear naked choke. And I honestly think that Ramos can get that back. And if he does get that back of Murphy, I don't think Murphy will stand up for that round, and he might end up getting finished in any round that Ramos takes his back. So that's the glaring path to victory. On the feet, it's a little bit closer. You might want to argue that Murphy is the slightly better striker. He does move very well. He's fluid. He switches stances, mixes in punches with kicks. Like I've already mentioned, he's got great cardio. So Murphy definitely has strengths on the feet. And if this fight was a kickboxing fight for 15 minutes, then the line should be much closer, potentially even a pick'em. It's just that huge path to victory that I've mentioned for Ramos on the mat. And like I say, even if it's not straight away, even if Ramos tests his striking, I think he will want to get this fight to the mat, especially the longer it goes on. I think Ramos can get Lerone Murphy down once, twice, 3 times if he needs to. And I think when he does get Murphy down, we'll see a very evident gap of skills on that mat. And if Ramos can't get the submission, he should win the rounds with the control on the ground. So I am going to pick Ricardo Ramos to win. And in the next fight, we've got the highly anticipated debut of the former Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion, Modestas Bukauskas, who makes his debut against the also debuting Andreas Michailidis. And it's funny because I think Michailidis just wants to fight these Cage Warriors champions. Before the coronavirus hit, he was scheduled to fight Matthias Frederick, who is the Cage Warriors middleweight champion. But now in the UFC, he's got the Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion. In regards to the betting line, we've got Bukauskas, currently the -265 favourite. The comeback on Michailidis at +205 as the underdog. I'm not sure if there's any value on this fight because I do think the betting line should be a little bit shorter, but in the same respect, I do expect Bukauskas to win this fight at the same time. So it's a classic case, and I say this a lot, of one fighter that is very likely to win has just got a betting line that's probably slightly too wide. And as for where the line moves, up to Wednesday, I do think we see some money coming in on Michailidis. It wouldn't shock me if Bukauskas closed at the -225 line. If he goes the opposite way and starts hitting -300, I think that line would be very off. So I do think the money will come in on Michailidis and close the line come fight night. And as for the fight itself, like I say, I do favour Bukauskas. Michailidis looks like a bit of a meathead in there. He's got power, but he will come forward. He will wing bombs. He can tire himself out by doing that as well because he does put pretty much everything into every shot. And Bukauskas isn't a fighter that you're going to take out very easily. You know, Cage Warriors just struggled getting an opponent in for him that would really cause him problems. They were bringing in fighters from all around the globe and he was just beating fighter after fighter. And I actually think Bukauskas is a very good fighter. He's well-rounded as well. He's good on the feet. That's predominantly where his game is at, the striking. He's good offensively, but he knows when to be defensive as well. And that's going to be a key factor in this fight because I think Michailidis is going to come forward. He is going to want to bang. He is going to want to try and get Bukauskas out. But I just don't think it's going to be an easy task because Bukauskas seems to be very smart inside the cage. So what I actually think is going to happen in this fight is I do think it's going to be quite dicey for Bukauskas in the early moments. There might be some debut jitters there for sure, but Michailidis is going to be winging bombs. I do think that Bukauskas can stay out of the way of that knockout bomb from Michailidis. I think Michailidis will start tiring. I think Bukauskas will push forward and start accumulating volume. He doesn't have necessarily that one punch huge knockout power, but he has volume, accumulation of it, as I've just mentioned, and that results into a lot of his finishes. But Bukauskas, I think, has got slightly underrated wrestling as well. So if Michailidis is tired, Bukauskas might want to play it safe, take him down and look to work on the mat. So I could see either avenue for victory with Bukauskas, but he's just got to be careful early on in this fight because he might run the risk of getting knocked out. I don't think that happens. I think Bukauskas has a good UFC debut, looks good, looks to get a bigger name in his next fight. I'm picking Modestas Bukauskas to win this fight. And in the next fight, again, we've got a really fun fight. We've got Jared Gordon versus Chris Fishgold. Jared Gordon currently the -140 favourite. The comeback on Fishgold at +120. In regards to where the value is with this betting line, I think the value's on Chris Fishgold. I think he is going to be a bit of a problem for Gordon. I don't think it's going to be as black and white as what I originally thought it was going to be before I went into tape. So, like I say, I think there's value on the underdog. And as for where the line moves, I can see more money coming in on Jared Gordon. I really can. I think Chris Fishgold's line is going to get wider and he may end up hitting +140, +145. People really love Jared Gordon, and I do get it because he's a well-rounded fighter. He's quite safe, even though he has been knocked out a few times. But when he's on his game, he does look really good. And for that, I think a lot of people trust Jared Gordon with the money. But as for how this fight plays out, it's going to be a really good fight. And it's a really well-matched fight as well. Because you look at the striking, Jared Gordon, you would think is the better technical striker. He does hold power as well. But Chris Fishgold is just a nightmare to deal with. He's got erratic movement, lateral movement, will be bouncing in and out of range. And you look at his fight against Calvin Kattar. I spoke earlier on about Calvin Kattar and how good he's striking with. Chris Fishgold was landing shots on Calvin Kattar on his UFC debut. That's Fishgold's UFC debut, not Kattar's, by the way. And Fishgold was looking very, very good until Calvin Kattar found that opening I spoke about earlier, put him down and finished the fight. And when you watch Chris Fishgold and look at his style, his striking isn't even his biggest strength. He loves the ground game. He loves his jiu-jitsu. He loves submitting opponents. He's got good wrestling as well, so he can shoot those takedowns to get the fight to where he wants them. He's a really well-rounded fighter. The only real question mark that I've got on Fishgold is he does sometimes overexert himself early in fights. So you will see fights where he gets tired later on, but you'll see other fights where he doesn't. So it's really strange as there's no real consistency with his cardio. And on the flip side, I know I've just spoken a lot about Fishgold, but Jared Gordon's a good fighter. He's well-rounded. He's got good striking. He's also got good wrestling, good takedowns, good entries, good completion rate, and he's got decent topside grappling as well. And I actually trust Jared Gordon more on top of Fishgold than what I would Fishgold on top of Gordon. I think if Gordon gets Fishgold down to the mat, I think he can spend some time on top of Fishgold. Fishgold does at times look for potential submission opportunities off his back when really he should be thinking about standing back up. But I don't think his get-up game's too bad either. So if this fight hits the mat, I'm going to be really interested to see who comes out on top. But I think from a raw grappling perspective, I think Chris Fishgold is more dangerous because he has got good submission attempts. But again, on the flip side to that, Jared Gordon's never been submitted. Like I say, it's a really good fight. It's a really intriguing fight. But for me, it's just really hard to trust Jared Gordon's chin, especially when fighters are putting pressure on him. Even in the Dan Moret fight that he won, his last win in the UFC, Gordon had to resort to wrestling and top control. And Dan Moret is predominantly a grappler, but he was landing on Gordon. He was landing hard shots as well. And Gordon just didn't like it to the point where he took Moret down into Moret's world. Gordon was the better wrestler. He was the better grappler, but the fact remains he should have been the way better striker. And like I say, when Dan Moret was putting that pressure on and landed on him, Gordon didn't like it. I think that Chris Fishgold is going to be harder to beat for Gordon than what Gordon is to Fishgold. Jared Gordon is 100% going to have his moments in this fight, but I think Fishgold is going to find success in pressuring, pushing forward, landing shots early on, and he might tire come round 3, especially like I say with the heat in Abu Dhabi. But I think if it gets to that 3rd round, that Chris Fishgold might have been able to win the first 2 rounds. And if Gordon starts exchanging in the pocket wildly with Fishgold, which is exactly what Fishgold wants, I think that Fishgold could catch him and knock him out. I'm not necessarily saying it's a high percentage outcome, but I think that Fishgold does have multiple paths to victory in this fight. And although I think Jared Gordon might potentially be the more skilled fighter out of the 2, I just think Chris Fishgold is going to be more of a problem stylistically. So I'm picking Chris Fishgold to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Liana Jojua versus Diana Belbita. Belbita currently the minus 155 favourite. The comeback on Jojua at plus 135. As for the betting line, I think it's relatively fair. I don't see too much value either side here. Belbita the rightful favourite, and she's probably in the region of where she should be as well. And as for where the line moves, it wouldn't shock me if it did close up just because of the type of fight it is. Both women have had one fight in the UFC, both got beat in that debut. So if it closed up a little bit closer to fight night, I wouldn't be so shocked. And I actually think the fight plays out relatively close too. Jojua is a better fighter when she's coming forward and attacking takedowns. The problem with Jojua is she doesn't attack takedowns anywhere near as much as she should. And I think Belbita is the better striker, and that could be very evident on the night. And if it is evident, I do think that Jojua could make those adjustments inside the cage on the night. I think that she might be able to close that distance and take Belbita down. If she can do that and spend some time on top, then she'll put herself in a really good position in the judges' eyes on the scorecards if the fight does go 3 rounds. I think we've got a striker versus grappler fight here in a sense. Obviously all fights start standing, so it's down to Jojua about how and where she wants this fight to go. I think if she does start falling behind on the volume, I think she will make the adjustments as I've just spoken about. And the key thing for me in a fight like this is if the fight's close, if it's competitive, if it hits the judges' scorecards, the judges are going to be looking for any slight edge that they can lean towards to help them score this fight. And I think if Jojua scores the takedowns and spends 30 seconds on top or 60 seconds on top, that will be enough for at least 2 of the judges to sway the rounds that takedown and that top control happens in to Jojua. So for that reason, I think the fight is going to be close. I think Jojua could get the edge with the takedowns and top control. I'm going to pick the underdog in this fight, and I'm picking Liana Jojua to win. And in the next fight, we've got Jack Shaw versus the returning Aaron Phillips. Jack Shaw currently the -565 favourite. The comeback on Phillips +410. Now, this is supposed to have been Jack Shaw versus Anderson dos Santos. Dos Santos had to pull out. Now we've got Aaron Phillips. And I hate to say this in breakdowns, I really do, but I feel both Dos Santos and Phillips are just absolutely being fed to Jack Shaw. And if Jack Shaw loses to Aaron Phillips, I'll be very, very surprised. I totally understand the betting line at -565. I think at the current line, it has very marginal parlay value. It's not going to add a great deal to your parlay, but it's in the region where it might make a little bit of a difference. I could see this line moving -600, -650, maybe even -700 come fight night. I just think that stylistically, it's just a very, very good fight for Jack Shaw. As for Aaron Phillips, he fought twice in the UFC back in 2014. He lost to Sam Cecilia and Matt Hobar, ultimately got cut. He lost his subsequent fight after that. And then to his credit, he did go on a 5-fight win streak, which he's currently on. However, the level of competition that he was fighting is very suspect. When you watch him in those fights as well, especially his last fight, he was hurt, he was getting taken down. He did manage to win that fight, but he wasn't looking impressive in those fights. And now he's back in the UFC. In my honest opinion, and I don't mean any disrespect to Aaron Phillips, but I don't think he is at the UFC level. He's certainly not at Jack Shaw's level. I think Jack Shaw's the better striker, more volume. I think he's going to be stronger in the clinch. I think he's going to be able to score takedowns when he wants them. I don't think any of the defense of Phillips is going to be that effective against Shaw. I think Shaw's going to be able to take him down. He's going to be the better grappler on the mat. However Shaw wants to finish this fight, I think he'll be able to finish it. But I do think it's highly likely that Shaw's going to find the takedowns that he needs. I think he's going to be able to find the back of Aaron Phillips, and I think he's going to choke him out. So I'm picking Jack Shaw to win this fight. And into the final fight of the breakdown, we've got two newcomers, a short notice fight as well. We've got Timo Voigt versus Kenneth Berg. As for the betting line, it's a straight up -120 pick-em between both fighters. And like I said earlier on in the McCann and Santos breakdown, I think if you've got a really good read on this fight, both sides are playable. I think there's value either side depending on your read. But I get the fact that it's a pick-em because when you watch tape on these guys, both of them are good in their own areas and both good in their areas where their opponent's probably the weakest as well. It makes for a really good stylistic matchup. As for where the line moves, I think the money will start to come in on Kenneth Berg a little bit. He opened as a -250 favourite on the Contender Series. He's a big, strong, powerful fighter for £205, and he's also the training partner of Jack Hermansson as well, so he's clearly got good bodies around him. But on the flip side, you look at Timo Voigt, he's got good bodies around him as well. The All-Stars gym in Sweden. So like I say, with the line movement, I'll make the prediction of it coming in for Kenneth Berg, but I am very intrigued to see what fighter that money comes in on. As for how the fight plays out, again, like I've already mentioned, it's going to be a very good fight from a stylistic perspective. We've got Berg that on the feet with his striking. He looks very stiff. The combinations aren't always there. He will throw a 1-2, but the volume of his striking will reduce the longer the fight goes on. He does prefer to be in close, tie his opponent up, take them down to the mat. But again, his wrestling isn't as relentless as what you'd want it to be. But when he does get on top of his opponents, you can definitely see that Jack Hermansson game in Kenneth Berg. He's got good ground and pound. He's got good transitions. He's got good control. And like I say, they're traits shared by Jack Hermansson as well. As for Voigt's a bit of a different fighter. He looks to be more of a striker. He's very quick on the feet. He's very fluid. He does have combinations. He's in and out of the range really nicely. That's where he's going to cause Kenneth Berg problems because Berg's a little bit slower, a little bit more stationary, a little bit stiffer on the feet. So I do think that Timo Voigt is going to have a lot of success striking with Berg. But as I've mentioned a few times in this breakdown already, that could force the wrestling, the grind from Berg to come forward to make sure he's not out there striking and getting beaten, and that's where it makes it an interesting fight. I'm actually picking Kenneth Berg to win this fight. Out of the two, for me, it does seem like a striker versus wrestler, grappler type of fight. Not that Berg can't strike, and not that Berg is just a wrestler and a grappler, but I just think he's going to be outmatched definitely on the feet against Timo Foyt. I think he is going to want that fight on the mat, and I really do think that he can get the fight to the mat. We've seen Timo Foyt be taken down before, and if he does get back up, or if the round does end, then he can look tired from that grappling, and that's what I mean. I think he is one of those strikers that does prefer to strike, and when he's forced to wrestle or grapple, then that expends more energy from him, energy that he's not used to expending. So I think the greater advantages are with Berg in this fight. It's very tricky to deal with on the mat as well. Submission attempts, sneaky submission attempts, reversals, sweeps, and more often than not, I do favour that type of fighter, so I'm picking Kenneth Berg to win the fight. And that's all for this midweek episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it. And once again, guys, I'd appreciate all the likes to the video and the subscriptions to our new channel too. I put a tweet out the other day just politely asking that if you listen to this podcast, please drop it a subscription. We've currently got just over 300 subscribers to the channel, and we're getting over 1,000 views to each breakdown video each week. So please, if you're tuning in, do us a favour and drop us a subscribe. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. We have plenty of different packages for you guys to choose from, including our brand new daily fantasy sports packages. So if you like to play DraftKings, or if you like to play FanDuel, or both for UFC events, then we've got you covered there too. And remember, finally, we've got those $10 UFC Fight Island offers as well. So just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.